Claire loved visiting her best friend Emily's house. It was always a place where she felt welcome, almost like a second home. Emily's family was warm, and the house carried years of laughter and memories. That weekend was no different. Claire had offered to help Emily prepare for a family gathering. And by the afternoon, after hours of chopping vegetables, setting up decorations, and running errands, she felt the weight of exhaustion. Emily, noticing her tired state, urged her to take a break. "Go rest, take a shower, freshen up. You've done more than enough already," Emily said with her usual kindness. Claire smiled gratefully and carried her bag upstairs to the guest room. The shower was a welcome escape. The warm water washed away the day's fatigue, and Claire closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the comfort of the moment. She hadn't realized how much she needed this pause, a simple moment of stillness. She hummed softly, the sound blending with the steady stream of water. Everything felt quiet, private, and safe. She thought about how grateful she was for Emily's friendship and the years they had shared together. But then, without warning, the bathroom door creaked open. Claire's eyes flew open and her heart skipped. She froze, confused, wondering if Emily had come to tell her something. The curtain of steam blurred her vision, but when she turned, she realized it wasn't Emily standing in the doorway. It was Daniel, Millie's son. Daniel was 22 now, taller than she remembered, with sharp features that made him look far from the shy boy she had once seen running through the house. His eyes widened as he realized what he had walked into. He stood, frozen, caught between leaving and explaining himself. The silence that fell in the room was heavy, almost louder than any words could have been. Claire's breath caught in her chest, her hand instinctively tightening around the edge of the shower curtain. "Daniel." Her voice shook, partly from surprise, partly from the strange tension in the air. "What are you doing here?" His expression was one of shock, but there was something else beneath it, something he wasn't quick enough to hide. I didn't know you were in here," he stammered, his voice awkward but soft. His hand lingered on the doorknob, yet he didn't pull away immediately. Claire's pulse quickened. The moment stretched longer than it should have, seconds feeling like minutes. She expected him to quickly turn and leave, to apologize and shut the door behind him. But he lingered, caught in hesitation, his gaze unable to fully break away from her. Claire's chest tightened at the realization. For years she had seen Daniel as nothing more than Emily's Suna, polite young man who had grown up under her best friend's roof. She remembered him as a teenager with messy hair and an easy laugh, never serious, always carefree. But the man standing in the doorway now wasn't the same boy. He was older, his presence sharper, his expression more complex. And in that moment, Claire felt a shift she couldn't explain. She pulled herself together and spoke again, this time firmer. "Daniel, you need to leave." He blinked, almost as if her words broke him out of a spell. "Right? I'm sorry," he muttered, finally stepping back. His face was flushed, and before she could say more, he closed the door quietly behind him. Claire pressed her back against the tiled wall, her heart racing. She tried to steady her breath, telling herself it was nothing more than an accident, an innocent mistake. He hadn't meant to walk in. He hadn't known she was there. Still, the look on his face lingered in her mind, the surprise, yes, but also the flicker of something else. Something she shouldn't be noticing. She finished her shower quickly, wrapped herself in a towel, sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, trying to gather her thoughts. It had all happened so quickly, yet the memory replayed in her mind again and again. His eyes, his hesitation, a strange silence that had filled the room, it all unsettled her in ways she didn't want to admit. Claire reminded herself that she was at her best friend's house, surrounded by people she loved and trusted. She wasn't supposed to feel shaken or restless. But now everything felt different. That unplanned, unguarded moment had stirred something she hadn't expected. And no matter how hard she tried to push it aside, her heart refused to calm down. When she finally heard Emily's cheerful voice calling her for dinner, Claire forced herself to stand, dress, and step out of the room. She told herself to forget what had just happened, to bury it as nothing more than an awkward mistake. But deep down, she knew it wasn't going to be that simple. Something had shifted between her and Daniel. and it left her both unsettled and strangely aware of a line she wasn't sure she wanted to cross. Emma sat at the cafe table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee she had barely touched. Across from her sat Marcus.com and attentive. His dark eyes focused on her in a way that made her uneasy and comforted at the same time. The place was small and quiet, the kind of spot where people came to think or talk about things they didn't know how to say anywhere else. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The smell of roasted beans and rain drifted through the air. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "You don't have to explain everything," he said softly. "I just thought you might need someone to talk to." Emma smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed the exhaustion she carried. "You probably didn't expect to hear my life story over rent," she said, her voice thin. He shook his head. "It's not about rent. It's about people. Sometimes we all need someone to listen." Something about his tone made her exhale a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked down, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "It's just been a hard year," she began. "Ryan and I, we used to be close. But lately, he's like a stranger. He's always out late, always on his phone. When he's home, it feels like I'm living with a ghost." Marcus didn't interrupt. He simply nodded, his eyes steady. "I keep trying to fix things," she continued. "But he's not trying anymore. I'm doing everything: bills, groceries, work, and it's like none of it matters. Sometimes I feel invisible." Her voice cracked slightly at the last word. She looked away, embarrassed. "Sorry, you don't need to hear all that." "Don't apologize," Marcus said quietly. "You deserve to be seen, Emma. Everyone does." Those words landed deeper than he probably realized. Emma blinked back tears. It had been so long since anyone had said something kind without expecting something in return. She couldn't remember the last time Ryan had looked at her the way Marcus just did, with sincerity, not obligation. They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Outside, the rain softened against the window. Emma finally managed a small laugh. "You're a very patient landlord," she said. "I've been told I'm a good listener." Marcus replied with a half smile. "And for the record, I'm not worried about the rent. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." That simple statement hit her harder than she expected. She had gotten used to being fine for everyone at work, in her marriage, in her own home. But hearing someone else ask if she was truly okay felt foreign. It's almost unreal. When they left the cafe, the rain had stopped. But the streets were still slick and shining under the streetlights. Marcus walked beside her, his pace slow and easy. For a while, neither spoke. The quiet between them didn't feel awkward. It felt natural, as if they both needed the silence to process what had just passed between them. Halfway down the block, their hands brushed as they walked. The contact was brief, unintentional. But it sent a small jolt through Emma. She pulled her hand back quickly, staring ahead, pretending not to notice. But her heart was racing. Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable, but he didn't say anything. When they reached her building, he stopped at the door. "Thank you for the company," he said, with a polite smile. "Thank you for the coffee," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. He nodded, then turned to leave. For a moment, she watched him go, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, something warm, something dangerous. It wasn't love. It wasn't even attraction in the way she knew it. It was the feeling of being seen again, of being remembered. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Ryan came home late, as usual. He mumbled a greeting, then went straight to the shower. Emma turned toward the wall, her eyes open in the dark. She didn't cry. She was past crying. But her mind kept drifting back to Marcus's calm voice. The way he listened, the quiet strength in his words. In the following days, she tried to go back to normal. She worked, cleaned, and kept herself busy. But Marcus seemed to appear everywhere, sometimes fixing the hallway light, sometimes walking through the building with his toolbox, sometimes just smiling politely as they passed, each time. Emma felt that same confusing mix of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude because he cared enough to ask how she was doing. Guilt because a part of her looked forward to seeing him. One afternoon, as she came home from work, Marcus was standing by the entrance, checking something on the intercom. "Hey," he said, smiling when he saw her. "How's your day been?" "Tiring," she admitted. "But I survived." "That's something," he said lightly. "Let me know if you need anything fixed in your apartment." She nodded. "Actually, the faucet in the kitchen has been dripping again. I'll stop by tomorrow," he said. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about the simple promise in his voice. He didn't make it sound like a chore. He said it like he meant it. The next day, true to his word, he showed up with a small tool bag. She tried not to seem nervous as he worked under the sink. The silence stretched between them again, not heavy, but full of something unspoken. When he finished, he stood, wiped his hands, and smiled. "All set." "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than usual. Marcus hesitated before speaking again. "Emma, I hope you don't think I'm overstepping, but if you ever just need to talk, I'm around." Our breath caught. She opened her mouth to answer, but couldn't find the words. She just nodded. After he left, Emma stood in the quiet apartment, staring at the door. The drip from the faucet was gone. But the quiet now felt different, alive somehow. She didn't know what to make of Marcus, or the way his presence made her heart move in small, careful ways. But deep down, she sensed something changing. She didn't know where it was leading, but she knew this. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. Outside, the city lights shimmered through her window, and the faint sound of rain began again. Emma stood there, her hand lightly touching the counter, lost in thought. The night felt like the start of something she couldn't quite name, something both fragile and strong. Like hope returning after too many silent years. The week after the cafe felt strangely different for Emma. She woke up each morning with the weight of her failing marriage pressing against her chest. But there was something else, Noen, echo of Marcus's words. She tried to push them aside, to remind herself he was just her landlord, that his kindness didn't mean more than what it was. But the truth was harder to ignore. She wanted to see him again. Marcus seemed to sense that. He began stopping by more often, always with a reason that sounded practical enough. The faucet in the kitchen dripped. The heating needed to be checked. A package had been delivered downstairs. Each time he came, Emma told herself it was just routine. Yet she couldn't ignore the way her stomach tightened whenever she heard his knock, or the way her voice softened when she said hello. One evening, a storm rolled through the city. The sky was heavy with rain, the windows rattling under the force of the wind. Emma sat alone on the couch, listening to the storm. Ryan had once again left with no explanation, promising he'd be working late. She didn't bother asking anymore. She already knew the answers she would never hear. There was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Marcus standing there, his jacket damp from the rain, a stack of letters in his hand. "These were left downstairs," he said, offering them to her. "Thank you," she replied, taking the papers. She could have left it at that, could have let him go back into the rain. But the loneliness of the storm pressed against her heart, and before she could stop herself, she asked, "Do you want to come in for a minute?" Marcus hesitated only briefly before stepping inside. He took off his jacket, setting it carefully on the chair, and looked around the small living room. "It's warm in here," he said softly, almost as if it were a compliment. Emma nodded, sitting back on the couch. Marcus sat across from her in the armchair, the rain filling the silence between them. For a few minutes, neither spoke. She stared at the envelope in her hand, not really seeing it, only feeling the quiet pull of his presence. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "How have you been since the other day?" Emma let out a tired laugh, shaking her head. "Still the same? Still married to someone who barely notices me? Still behind on bills? Still trying to pretend I'm fine?" "You don't have to pretend," he said, his voice low but certain. She met his gaze. "Okay," her breath catching at the intensity in his eyes. There was no pity there, no judgment, just something steady, something that felt dangerously close to comfort. She looked away quickly, afraid of what she might feel if she didn't. "Sometimes I think I've already lost him," she whispered. "But I don't know how to admit it. I don't know what that means for me." Marcus leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. It means you're human. It means you've been carrying something too heavy alone. And it's not your fault he chose to stop showing up. His words sank into her like rain soaking into dry ground. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. For so long she had convinced herself she needed to be stronger, quieter, less demanding. But here was someone telling her she deserved more. The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling through the city. The lights flickered once, then steadied again. Emma felt the moment tighten around them, as though the walls of her apartment had shrunk. Pulling them closer, "Marcus," she said softly, her voice trembling, "you're my landlord. You shouldn't be here like this." "Sometimes I think I've already lost him," she whispered, "but I don't know how to admit it. I don't know what that means for me." Marcus leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. "It means you're human. It means you've been carrying something too heavy alone. And it's not your fault he chose to stop showing up." His words sank into her like rain soaking into dry ground. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. For so long she had convinced herself she needed to be stronger, quieter, less demanding. But here was someone telling her she deserved more. The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling through the city. The lights flickered once, then steadied again. Emma felt the moment tighten around them, as though the walls of her apartment had shrunk. Pulling them closer, "Marcus," she said softly, her voice trembling, "you're my landlord. You shouldn't be here like this." He held her gaze, steady and unshaken. No. But I don't want to lie, Emma. I don't want to pretend I don't feel something when I'm near you." Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. She could hear her own heartbeat over the sound of rain. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he was imagining it. But she couldn't, because she felt it too. "I feel it," she admitted quietly, her voice almost breaking. "I don't want to, but I do." The air between them shifted, thick with unspoken meaning. They didn't move closer, didn't touch, but the longing was there, hanging heavy in the room. Emma's hands gripped the edge of the couch, as if holding herself back from a line she wasn't ready to cross. Marcus leaned back slowly, as though giving her space. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "I don't want to be the reason things fall apart." Emma shook her head. "Things are already broken. You're not the reason. You're just reminding me what it feels like to be noticed." Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. But Marcus didn't look away. His steady presence made it harder, not easier to hide. For the next hour, they spoke in quiet voices. The kind people use when they're admitting truths they've never said aloud. Emma told him about the nights she lay awake waiting for Ryan, about the way silence had become louder than words in her marriage. Marcus listened without interruption, his face calm, his attention unwavering. When the storm finally began to ease, Marcus stood. He reached for his jacket, slipping it back over his shoulders. At the door he paused, turning back to her. "Emma," he said gently, "I don't expect anything from you. But I needed to be honest. You deserve to know that someone sees you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, wanted to ask him to stay, wanted to do something other than stand there frozen. But the words wouldn't come. He gave her one last look, warm, steady, unspoken, before stepping into the hallway. The door clicked shut, leaving Emma alone in the quiet aftermath. She leaned against it, closing her eyes, her hands trembling at her sides. She told herself nothing had happened, that it was just words, just a storm, just a moment. But her heart knew differently. Something had shifted. A line had been drawn, not yet crossed, but dangerously close. The rent, the bills. Even her failing marriage, all of it, blurred in that moment, overshadowed by the truth she could no longer deny. She wanted more than survival. She wanted to feel alive again. And Marcus, whether she admitted it or not, had reminded her of that. As the storm clouds thinned and the city quieted outside, Emma sat alone in her living room, her thoughts louder than the rain. She knew nothing could be the same now. Not after tonight. Ryan came home late again. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, the lamp casting a soft glow over unopened bills. She didn't look up when he walked in, but she caught the faint trace of perfume on his shirt that wasn't hers. Her chest tightened. She had suspected it for weeks, but tonight it felt undeniable. He tossed his keys onto the counter, muttered something about being tired, and disappeared into the bedroom without asking how she was or noticing the heaviness in her eyes. Emma sat there in silence, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing, his footsteps moving around the room they once shared. She felt the distance more clearly than ever. Their marriage wasn't just struggling, it was gone. The house they had built together was now only walls and furniture. The love had slipped out slowly, leaving behind silence and shadows. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of Ryan's steady breathing beside her. She wanted to ask him where he went, why he came home smelling like someone else, why he looked at her like she was invisible. But the words never came. She knew the answers wouldn't heal anything. They would only confirm what her heart already knew. By morning, the weight in her chest hadn't lifted. She made coffee, but the bitterness only added to the unease twisting in her stomach. She kept hearing Marcus's voice in her head. "You don't owe me an explanation. You just owe yourself happiness." Those words clung to her like a lifeline, reminding her of the truth she was too afraid to face. A knock came at the door. She froze, her heart racing. She knew it was him. "Marcus?" She opened the door. And there he was, standing calmly, his presence filling the doorway without forcing its way in. He didn't look like a landlord here to discuss rent. He looked like a man carrying words he needed to say. "Emma," he said softly, "I wanted to check in. Not about the apartment. About you." Her throat tightened. She stepped aside, letting him in. He set his hands in his pockets, glancing briefly around the room before turning his eyes back to her. There was a seriousness in them, a weight that made her chest ache. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said, his voice steady. "But I need you to hear this. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your pain. The only thing you owe yourself is the chance to be happy again." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink them away, but they slipped free, rolling down her cheeks. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in months. Ryan never noticed her tears anymore. But Marcus did. He stood quietly, giving her space, his presence solid but never overwhelming. "I don't even know what happiness looks like anymore," she whispered. "I've spent so long trying to hold together something that's already broken. I don't know who I am without it." Marcus shook his head gently. "You're more than the pieces you've been holding. You're someone worth seeing, worth hearing, worth loving. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Her chest shook with a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. No one had spoken to her like that in years. No one had reminded her she was worth more than the silence she had accepted. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was heavy, not with temptation, but with truth. Marcus wasn't asking her for anything. He wasn't demanding her affection or pressing for answers. He was simply standing there, offering something she had been starved of understanding. Emma looked toward the closed bedroom door, where Ryan still slept, distant even in his dreams. She thought about the years she had given to a marriage that no longer gave back. She thought about the loneliness that had hollowed her out, the way she had learned to smile in public and break in private. And then she thought about Marcus, about the way he had shown her more care in a few weeks than Ryan had in years. Her tears slowed, but the ache in her chest remained. "I don't know if I'm ready to make choices," she admitted. "I don't know if I'm ready to leave everything behind." "You don't have to decide today," Marcus said softly. "But don't keep living like you don't matter. Because you do." The words lingered long after he left. Emma closed the door behind him and pressed her forehead against it, her heart racing. She felt both lighter and heavier at once, lighter because someone had finally spoken to her heart. Heavier because she knew the truth she could no longer ignore that evening. Ryan left again, barely offering a goodbye. Emma didn't stop him. She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on as night fell. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond him. A life where she wasn't waiting for scraps of attention. A life where she wasn't carrying everything alone. She didn't imagine the details, didn't dare picture faces or futures. But she imagined the feeling peace, warmth, love that wasn't begged for but freely given. And in her heart, she knew she had already felt a glimpse of it with Marcus. The next morning, she woke up with clarity she hadn't felt in years. She didn't pack her bags, didn't confront Ryan, didn't make any sudden choices. But she stood taller. She brewed coffee and sat at the table with a calmness that surprised her. For once, the silence in the apartment didn't suffocate her. It felt like space. Space to think. Space to grow. Marcus's words returned to her again and again. You just owe yourself happiness. Emma didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if she would stay or leave, if she would choose the risk of love or the comfort of what she already knew. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't keep living in shadows, for now. That was enough. As she closed her eyes that night, she leaned against the door once more, her heart steady. The rent was no longer the real issue. The real question was whether she had the courage to step into the life waiting quietly outside her door.